Well, thank you both for being with us today. I appreciate it. Chief Gardner, you and I have known each other for a long time, but Amrish, I haven't known you as long, a little bit from the cricket field days.
Indeed.
So it's great to have you all here. I thought maybe before we start, why don't you just kind of, if you could introduce yourselves and kind of let us know what you're doing and where you're living. And
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, like you said, my name is Amrish Vyas. I live off of Jack's Landing in Triadelphia Mill and Highland Road corner. Moved in Howard County about 3 years ago. I'm an adjunct faculty at Howard County Community College and Anne Arundel County Community College.
what do you teach?
I teach business.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And I have a couple of retail businesses. I've been a small business owner for 15 years now.
Wow.
Live in the house with my wife and 2 young daughters,
Okay. How old are they?
11 and 14.
Okay. So they're in what, high school?
So my high schooler goes in 10th grade this fall, and my elementary schooler gets into middle school this year.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So how's retirement, Chief Gardner?
Retirement's very good. I've after spending 35 years as a police officer and also as the chief of police in Howard County, some time off I think was good for me, time to reflect, but also some time to enjoy doing some of those honeydew projects at the house and getting down to the beach in Ocean City. I enjoy that.
That's great. And I miss seeing Kathy. She's a super person. You definitely married up.
Sure,
Good.
she appreciates
Yeah,
that.
you'll tell her that. But anyway, I appreciate you guys coming out because we wanted to talk a little bit about public safety and about what's been going on in Howard County. And I want to kind of get both of your perspectives on it since we have one more professional and one as a community member. I've seen out there that the current county executive is trying to tell everybody the crime's gone down. And I go around the community and very few people tell me crime's gone down. I think there might be some instances of property crime going down, which maybe could be because, who's going to break into a house if they know people are there because COVID? No one's. But violent crime certainly seems to be going up. And I think statistics show that. So I'd be curious, Amrish, have you kind of, what's your sense of public safety issues? Not just SROs, we can talk about that later, but just public safety in general. How do you feel?
Well, the community that we live in, I feel pretty safe. But overall in the county, I think you're right. The crime rate hasn't gone down, from what I understand. I think the traffic intersection fatalities have gone up this year, considerably so than last few years. The general sense I have is that crime hasn't really gone down. I'm sure you and the chief has more statistics to share about that, but that's just, as a resident, my perception.
Yeah, when I talk to community members, a lot of people are worried about the violent crime, and you hear about shootings. We heard about the terrible shooting on Super Bowl Sunday at the Wild Lake Village Center. The middle of the afternoon, there was a shooting, and a woman and her son both got shot. And fortunately, they weren't fatal. But can you imagine walking through Wild Lake Village Center on a Sunday afternoon? You have to worry about someone shooting you.
Absolutely.
How about you, Chief Gardner? Any thoughts?
Well, crime in general across the country lately has been a concern in a lot of communities. And here in Howard, some of the things that I'm seeing are indicators that should be ringing some alarm bells in the police department. Carjackings, for example, we really hadn't seen carjackings during my tenure as chief. We didn't have that many. And now I believe over the last 2 years we've had over 35 carjackings. And that is a big concern. If people here in Howard County can remember, one of the most heinous carjacking crimes took place in the county in 1992. Actually was one of the cases that was cited when it became a federal crime. And my concern is that we all know what happened in the Basu case in 1992. On her way to take her 2-year-old to school, and 2 suspects came up, carjacked her. She's trying to get her 2-year-old out of a car seat, and then she was dragged over 2 miles down the road. And then the 2-year-old was tossed in a car seat right onto the road. These things can become very tragic. They're very violent crimes, and they seem to be occurring much more frequently. And so I certainly hope that that's on the radar of our police department right now, and things that we can do to help prevent those crimes, and also some educational information for our community, what they need to do. but they certainly seem to be happening on a much more frequent basis.
Yeah, that's very scary because you're right. That's very violent, and you often hear about carjackings with like young children in the back, and the person who's carjacking is not caring about that young person. They're just getting in the car and going away. So, yeah, that is sad. That's sad, and it's very disturbing as well.
That reminds me of an incident last fall. I think it was late fall. We were on a vacation, and I got a text message from my neighbor Tori Smith that both of his car got jacked in his parking lot. And I remember getting on the phone and making sure my alarm systems were on and all the doors and windows were closed and all that. Of course, we weren't home, but so that's a recent memory. So if I go by my personal experience, and we live in a community where everybody touted that community as a safe neighborhood, like nobody comes in this area because nobody knows that this area exists, kind of a thing, right?
Right.
Not so true.
No, I understand that, and the thefts and the vehicle thefts, I'm sure, are up as well. I mean, it's very difficult to see this happening in our community because I can tell you, I've lived here all my life. And I know Gary, 35 years of the police department. I mean, I don't remember it being this way. I mean, maybe there was some time. Maybe you do. I don't remember as a community worrying a whole lot about crime. Maybe a little bit when there's some gang violence a while ago. But
I can tell you back. I started in 1984, and we would average anywhere from 6 to 9 homicides a year. And then through, I believe, domestic violence policy now, where it's much more proactive in trying to protect the victim of domestic violence, we saw a decrease. And I think that was a great example of effective policy that had an impact on reducing homicides in the county and across the country. So then, typically we would see 2 or 3 homicides a year. Now back up to 11, the highest ever that we've had in our county's history, is alarming. And the fact that many of these shootings are taking place in public areas. These are not taking place in a home like many of the domestic cases we've had in the past. These are occurring out on the street, and obviously innocent victims, bystanders, can be victimized by this as well. So it should be something of high priority and concern, not only to the police department but also the county executive.
Interesting. So, I mean, what would you like if you were still chief? What would be your thought process of what should be happening when we see these? Because it's interesting. You said you started in 1984, and that was the last time I believe that there were 11 homicides in 1 year. It's the year you started, and definitely, as you said, it went down, and now it's back up again. I mean, if you were chief, what would you be focusing on?
Well, the one thing, you have to take a look and dissect each of these cases. You have to look at the origin. So, was this a crime of opportunity? Was this where someone was being robbed and the robbery went bad? Is this a domestic case? Is this a drug-related case? Is this a gang-related case? All those factors have to be considered. And so really you need to take a look at the homicides, the shootings that we've had, and find out what type are they. Are they drug-related? We at times would have some impact from the city. Howard County used to be known at one point in time where a lot of the stash houses were out here in the county where the drugs were kept because they felt it was a safe community. And occasionally we would get some backlash of rivals that would come into the city and settle a score or whatever. So really you have to sit back and take a look at those origins and see what type of a homicide it is. And also, where are these suspects? Are they local? Are they from the outside? So really you have to do your homework and take a look to see a deep dive into these cases and then have an approach as to what the police department can do.
Sure. But it's just very scary when you see 11 homicides.
Well, when you have an 11-year-old girl and a 14-year-old girl, it's very scary from my perspective as a resident. I remember my daughter being part of this musical at Riverhill called Matilda. And on the last day of the show, just last Sunday, they were going out to dinner after the last show to celebrate the success of the show. And I remember asking her 1,000 questions. Who's going with you? Which restaurants are you going to? Are you guys going to hang out in the parking lot? If you're hanging out in the parking lot, who's going to be with you? And my daughter at one point got really irked with me, and it's like, what's about the, investigation? And I was like, you don't understand. As a father, I got to ask you all these questions. I know you're annoyed, but I got to do the right thing by asking you all these questions. If any of the answers to these questions are not favorable to me, then you bet I'm showing up in that parking lot, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So as a father, it's a scary statistics, and I think the chief is right. It all comes down from policymaking. Effective policymaking can resolve a lot of issues.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also from the leadership of the county, not even just the police department, because you need to have support from the county executive, the county council, and frankly, from my talking to a lot of retired police officers and some current, of course I won't say who they are, there really is a concern about the lack of support they're getting from the county executive's office, and I think that's important. I mean, I can tell you, I walk around and visit a lot of communities now in Howard County, and it's not unusual for me to see some police officers, and they'll come up and say hi, and one of the first things they say is, "We miss you." And it's not hard to say we appreciate you, and I don't think that's being said enough. I don't think it's been acted upon enough. I think that sometimes national issues have come into play in Howard County, where people are focusing on things that are outside of Howard County and bring it to Howard County. I mean, we have an awesome police department.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I was a county council member, a state senator, and fortunately as county executive for 4 years, I mean, I never second-guessed what was going on. And, Chief, you were also a big part of that because I had complete respect and trust in you. But all of your majors and all the leadership and all the officers, I knew that they were going to do the best thing. But I also knew that if there's something went wrong, we would deal with it. And we would make sure that someone was held accountable. But right now it seems like it's the default has gone the other way. And you and I were talking about teachers recently. I mean, when I was young, a teacher was always right. Now teachers aren't always right. Sometimes apparently they're there to hurt my kid. Well, no, you're not. The teachers are doing really well. And when I was a young person, if my dad heard the teacher was mad at me, I was in big trouble. But it's also the default's gone from we trust our police officers to no, maybe we don't. And that's sad.
Yeah, I will echo your comments. We have one of the best police departments in the country. And one of my biggest concerns right now, from what I'm hearing, similar to what you're hearing, is the morale of the department. The morale is at its all-time low. As I said, I've been a police officer since 1984, retired in 2018. And when you have an agency with the morale that low, that's not beneficial to the community. That should be a big community concern when your department has morale at the level that it is right now. And it's not just, sometimes you may have an issue. I remember when I started in 1984, I believe it was in 85, there was some concerns expressed by the union with the chief. At that time, there was some morale issues then, and every once in a while something may bubble up, but I've never seen it to the point where it is today. And that impacts a lot of things in the agency. For example, proactivity. Officers, we believe in community policing, but part of community policing is getting out there in those communities. And when you have areas that are seeing an uptick, you immediately have to get in there and address it. Do we have enough patrol officers right now out on the street? I know that when I left, a study had just been completed, an independent study by a contractor that said I believe we needed 12 or 14 additional officers in patrol. And that would provide enough for taking, receiving calls, and handling calls, but also provide time for community policing and proactivity. And that involves, when you have an issue, to go out into the communities, do field interrogation reports on suspicious activity. Don't wait for that caller. You're the police. You're out there to protect the community, and you have to get out there in the community. And then when I see traffic stops, for example, traffic stops at an all-time low. When I saw that traffic stops since I left have fallen 76%, that's another indication that there's a problem right now in the department. And that's something that the new chief's going to have to get on top of and address immediately. That's a very big concern. And I've talked to other retired chiefs, and we are all very concerned right now where things are with that morale and the impact it's having on other aspects of policing and public safety in the county.
I'm curious, you talk about the traffic stops, though. I mean, my first thought is that the response is going to be, well, COVID. People were not driving during COVID, so of course we're not going to stop as many people. But the statistics show that in my last year in office, in 18, and your last year as chief, I think there was over 18,000 traffic stops. The next year in 19, before COVID, it was down to 13,000. And then in 2020, it was down to 4,000. And then in 2021, I believe it was even below 4,000. And so it's hard to have the COVID argument when in 19 there was no COVID and it went down dramatically. And if you want to use 2020 as an example, but 2021 was more people driving. There's no question.
Absolutely.
No question.
And it still went down.
Yeah.
And so COVID can't be the answer. So, I mean, do you think it's a morale issue? I mean, what do you think is the thought?
First of all, since after the Ferguson incident, agencies across the country experienced a reduction in traffic stops. That was a big concern. I attended a National Highway Safety conference in Atlanta with other law enforcement executives, and that was a topic of conversation about the reduction of traffic stops in the community. And when I say traffic stops, I mean that's just one way that we reduce traffic fatalities and serious incidents on our highways. It's education, engineering, and enforcement. And enforcement's the key. But when I noticed that not even 3,000 stops were made in 2021, that's very serious. I understand from people that I've spoken to, at the end of a year, some officers haven't even made a traffic stop.
Wow.
I mean, that's just unbelievable to me. So I think it may lend itself to the morale issue. There may be other things going on. You really have to do a deep dive and speak to the officers at every level, patrol, supervision, to find out what is really going on. Highway safety has always been an issue and a very high priority in the police department. If you look on our website, I'm sorry, the Howard County Police website,
Yeah.
I'm no longer there. It indicates, and we talk about, or they talk about, that highway safety is a priority in the county and always has been. Right now, that's certainly in question, and that has to change. Our fatalities, I haven't seen the numbers this high are absolutely incredible. And having lost a family member recently to a drunk driver in another state, that is a concern. A death is a death in the family. I know certainly a violent crime death is serious, but when you get that phone call from about a loved one, that they're no longer coming back, that they left for work in the morning, but they're not coming back, that's a call you never want to receive. No one does. So highway safety is just as important as our violent crime concerns. So we really have a lot to work on here in the county.
We do, and you brought up, I mean, I didn't say it earlier, but the traffic fatalities, again, if you're trying to use the COVID example, they should be going down. Right. They're not. They have gone up every year since 2018, and now they're 13 more last year than in 2018, up to 33 in 1 year. And, I mean, that would concern me as a father. I mean, and you're driving, and your child, I guess, your oldest daughter will be driving soon, right?
A couple of years, yeah. Actually, she's already talking about taking over my old car.
I'm sure.
But that's a concern. Now, you know, as citizens of a county or a state, I would say that sometimes you're so engrossed in your day-to-day life that you don't really pay attention on a daily basis to these statistics, right? But the way you're talking about it, Chief, it makes me more worried about whether or not I want to get that driver's license for my daughter, because the fatalities are going up, but the traffic stops are significantly going down. Now, that correlation between those two numbers is a problem.
Oh, absolutely. And we've always looked at cases, fatalities, for example, of what's the underlying cause. So years ago, anyone who's been in the county for a while knows that we used to have a problem with our students in the schools, and many of them became statistics over the summer and sometimes throughout the school year due to traffic fatalities, poor judgment, of course, a lack of experience behind the wheel. And so back then, the chief initiated a project in the schools with traffic safety that they would have to go through a course before they get their parking permit. So it's a matter of taking a look at the issue and then coming up with a strategy to try to reduce the problems that we're having on our highways. And in that case, it was with our youth. And it's been very successful throughout the year. So really a close examination of what's going on with these fatalities has to take place, and then the police department has to respond accordingly. We cannot control engineering. We work with our traffic engineers all the time on issues that we see patrolling the county, and we point things out to the traffic engineers and they take a look at it. Education is important. We know how education can impact driving habits. The seatbelt law is a great example of that. As youngsters, and I'm just maybe looking at the one across the table from me, probably realizes, when we were young kids, that wasn't something that we thought about when we got in the car, right?
Not at all.
In the back of a station wagon, unbelted. Today, that's not the case, and we've saved a lot of lives from that education campaign. And today, we're going to have to start taking a close look at it again. We do not want to see those numbers increase.
Yeah, I want to go ahead. Yeah.
Funny you talk about young drivers behind the wheel. Just yesterday's incident, I was coming home from work, and I made a left on Philadelphia Mill Road. Somebody was right behind me, probably not even one car's distance, from Ten Oaks off of 108. And I made a right turn signal to turn in onto my community in Jack's Landing. This person goes on the other side of the road and passes me over by maybe a couple of inches. And I honked my horn because that's my neighborhood. I don't want people to drive aggressively. And then all of a sudden there's a slam on the brake and the car reverses back, and there are two young people in the car, both showing me fingers and both calling me names. And I've heard this multiple times. Go back to where you came from.
Oh gosh.
All of that. But you're right. This problem could be addressed with engaged education at the early age. And I would love to. I mean, right now I know we have driver's ed and everything in high school, but I would love if we can expand it onto having these discussions and dialogues. I think my kids, specifically mine, learn much better if they're engaged in a dialogue, in a conversation, just like we are.
And I'll do a little plug for the police department.
Yes.
Collision avoidance training, the CAT program the police department does for young people beginning their driving experience, and we have them out at the training academy. It's a phenomenal program. It helps them understand the dynamics of a vehicle, making those decisions, and actually getting in the car and braking hard, seeing what that's like. Most of us don't know what that's like until actually you're involved in a situation on a highway or a roadway. And so all of those things that the CAT program provides, I think, is a great resource. And it covers a gap that they don't receive necessarily in a driver's ed program.
Right.
Valuable.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I want to get back to a second about education, because I think we can get to SROs a little bit there. But before we go there, I mean, it seems to me when you don't have the police officers on the road doing traffic stops, that highway safety is huge, and that's the primary. But I also think it shows the people in the community and those coming through our community that our police are out there. Does that make any sense? It seems to me that if you see a police officer on 29 or 100 or 32 or 108 that at Brookland Parkway, then you can say, hey, they are out here, and they're protecting us in a good way, but also telling people who might want to do something, they're out here. And if they don't see them out here, well, maybe Howard County's the place to come to because they're not out here. Does that make any sense? I mean, Chief?
Absolutely. I think that I would be interested right now to see what the average speeds are on some of our roadways. That's something that I think we can do with State Highway Administration and see if there's an increase, because you're on the roadway right now, and you can be traveling 70 miles an hour on Route 32, which is well above the speed limit, and people are passing you as if they have no concern whatsoever. And that's happening on a lot of roadways today. So with the lack of visibility on the roads, that invites people. And if it occurs over a long period of time, those habits just get worse. And certainly the travel that I've done in the county, I don't see as many here. Quite frankly, and I used to say this in service training about visibility, about being out there.
Right.
traffic studies will show that the officers out making stops, visibility on the road is a deterrent to bad behavior. Many years ago, in 1984, when I traveled to the police academy when I lived in Frederick, I would see 3 locations on I-70 as an example of where there were state troopers sitting in the morning for morning rush hour. And if that was, of course, on my mind, I adjusted my speed coming in. Today, you don't see that. In Howard County, we tried to do a much different approach in being very visible, being out there during the peak times. We had a program where we looked at where our traffic accidents were. So we're not just out there writing tickets just because we want to write tickets. We're out there in areas where we had problems, areas where we had traffic accidents, and trying to identify what the cause was and then focus our enforcement efforts there.
Okay, it makes a lot of sense to me. What made me think about the school resource officer was when you were talking about helping teach students safety. When my kids were in high school, the school resource officer pretty much ran the prom safety committee. And he had all students come in and be part of the committee and talk about how we can make sure that at prom the kids are safe. We do worry. I mean, you're going to be facing that.
Don't get me started on talking about prom.
Yeah, but we all, I mean, I had the same issue with my kids. I mean, we want to make sure. And so the officer would have people come in and the students, like you have like a committee may have 10 students, and they would figure out how best to help the rest of the student population know the importance of safety and the importance of getting home from prom and all those things. And that was just one small thing that a school resource officer did. The program, to me, is a tremendous program, and Howard County's had it, I mean, for a long time in the high schools. Right. And then now the middle schools, they had for a while. They don't have them there now. And that's one of my biggest concerns. And actually, to be honest, one of the main reasons I'm running for to be elected again, is because my concern about the way we're doing in public safety, but also the way we're taking the school resource officers away from middle school just makes no sense to me. I mean, I can understand that maybe there's the reason why the county executive did it in a sense of a national mood or national issues, but I don't see a reason here in Howard County. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'm going to have a lot to talk about when you talk about SROs.
Well, let's talk about it now. Let's do it.
As a parent, it bothers me. It worries me that this. And pardon me if I go a little out of the way. I don't want to hurt your polling numbers or whatever.
No,
but I'm talking as a father.
Yes.
When we talk about SROs and when we talk about a national narrative, I think it's in fashion right now that we take one or two isolated incidents and put a question mark on complete structure of an agency.
Yes.
And that's not helping anybody. I mean, this whole defund the police and the same narrative is being applied to our SROs. One or two bad incidents, and what we want to do is we want to question the entire structure. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's wise. It's neither wise nor nice is how I say it. SROs don't only provide safety to our kids. Some of them are mentors. I had a couple of SROs in Wild Lake when I was mentoring there. They're mentors. They're coaches in our volleyball programs and soccer programs. And, so they have tremendous stake in the school that they're serving. And all of a sudden, because of one bad incident, you want to put a question mark on the entire program? And this is like, and I'm sorry if I'm drawing a bad analogy, but I'm a little emotional about these things. In our armed forces, we have bad incidents. Our armed force members do hurt their own, but we don't say defund our military. We don't ever say that. But when it comes to smaller agencies and police departments, it's in fashion these days to just go ahead and question them, defund them, get rid of them. That's not the solution. The solution is to build those bridges that we are trying to break by doing that. This will lead us into another debate about gun control and everything, but we live in a society where it is fashionable for a parent of a 13-year-old to buy them a gun as a birthday present. I mean, we can't deny that, right? That happens. So it wakes me up in the middle of the night, being a father of two young adults, that my kids are going in an environment where their safety is not guaranteed. I mean, we talk about de-escalation and, counseling and this, that, and the other, but when somebody is on the edge you can't really do anything.
Wow.
You just got to spend time in protecting. I said I'll have a lot to say about
No,
this.
I'm really glad, because I want to hear your point of view. I mean, your point of view is really, really important, Amrish. I appreciate that. Chief, why don't you talk about the program and what the officers go through to be part of the program? I think some people don't realize that these SROs, school resource officers, actually have specific training to be able to deal with students and be in that type of environment, right?
Absolutely. And I will say this, just to follow up with what you said regarding the importance of SROs. You know, we started out with the high schools, and then we went to the middle schools, and I will tell you that I was shocked to learn that we did away with the middle school SROs. Actually, I think it's probably the most critical section within the SRO program. I'm not saying that the high school SROs aren't important, because they absolutely are. They're a great resource. But we had a number of middle schools that our SROs were busier in those middle schools than they were the high schools. And they were very, very effective, not only within the schools and mentoring programs. They did the same thing that the high school SROs did, but they're also effective in addressing issues out in the community that were directly related to students leaving the school and going into the community. And I don't know, before we get into the training, I just want to share an experience I had. It's a great example because I really had a fondness for our SROs. They did an extraordinary job. Sometimes they were working under the radar, and people didn't know everything that they were doing. But over in Harper's Choice, the middle school SRO, we were at a community meeting, and residents were concerned about issues in the village center and also the grocery store there, and that students were coming after class, being disruptive, stealing from the store. The store had to bring security in, and I was being blasted for it that we weren't doing enough. And so I said, this is the first time it's come to my attention. Let me contact the SRO at that school. Mm-hmm. I did. The very next day, she went over there into she was waiting after school in the grocery store. She knew every kid that came in there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they saw her, an immediate reaction. They knew that she was there to take care of that issue, and that problem was resolved. Resolved in one simple case of just presence and knowledge. She didn't have to make any arrests. She didn't have to do anything like that. It was just her mere presence and conversation with those kids, and the problem was resolved. And there's countless examples like that. Sure. So I just wanted to share that a little bit because
and that wouldn't have happened if they didn't know her.
Absolutely.
I mean, if another police officer would come in and say, "I'm here to watch," that would not have happened.
But you know, Allan, it still breaks my heart that we took a step of removing SROs from middle school, because what I read about those SROs in the elementary school and middle school was not stopping, was not prevention. It was about educating our young kids about what is right and what is wrong, which, very, very much needed, because, I used to own and operate hotels before my life, and currently as a retailer, I still do talk about it. In terms of HVAC systems, we had a preventative maintenance program, right? PMP. And that had a structure, that had a quarterly checkpoints and this, that, and the other. SROs in middle school, to me, is like one of those preventative maintenance programs, right? Where you talk to kids, you tell them, you show them what are the consequences of your actions and how it can go down the hill for you. If that education, if that conversation is taken out of the equation completely, and the environment at the house or the kids they're hanging out with, it hasn't really changed much, right. You're talking about disaster down the road. No. And I'm still fuming with the fact that we just, one day the board decided we are taking them out because it
wasn't
fits
the
the
board.
national narrative.
It wasn't the board.
Correct.
Seriously, it was
Correct.
The county executive unilaterally took them out. There was a discussion with the board about whether they should have them or not, and they decided to keep them in high schools in a kind of a different kind of format, but they're still there. Right. But the county executive unilaterally said, no, they're out of middle schools. It wasn't like a discussion with the Board of Education.
And it's sad.
And, my concern here is that not just during my tenure as chief, but the tenure of the prior chief, we had a number of elected officials who were encouraging us, imploring us to expand the SRO program to cover middle schools. And it included the current county executive. He wanted us to expand that program. And so finally, we did. And then we saw that there was a great need to really expand that program because the SROs at that time were also working between two schools.
Yep.
And what we would find is that the SRO, while at one school, the other school that they were supposed to be watching, they had some issue going on. So then that principal wanted them back over the school. And really there was a need to have an SRO in both of those schools. So really there is a true need to have that expand into some of the other middle schools in the county.
And also, I remember, it was my last year in office, and I guess your last year as a chief. We actually worked out an agreement with the superintendent, Dr. Martirano. And I remember we were at Mount Hebron High School because there was a lot of concern about the parkland and everything else, and we were making sure that we had all the capital improvements necessary to make sure all the schools were locked and you couldn't get in unless you buzzed, and we make sure all the safety features were there. And we also announced that we had a program that we were going to have more SROs in middle schools, like every year, do a little bit more, so we would get to where every middle school would have one. That was our plan. And then we left office, and oh my God, now we're taking them out, and it was a plan that everybody kind of agreed on that we were going to have them in every middle school. Very sad.
And I think I heard the words used. It was like a compromise to remove them, and that was very disturbing. That was very disturbing to hear that, because the impact that they have on young. First, let me get back to the concern that the public wants more exposure to the police to build relationships. That's very key to the success of any public safety program. You have to have the trust of the community, and so especially with our young ones. So if there's concerns with some people in the county with students at that age, whether it's the middle school or the high school, with SROs, we've always had a history in Howard County working collaboratively to work on those issues directly. Don't just abandon the whole program, throw it out. Work on what those specific issues are so we can address them. Don't have them sitting back in the shadows of a school, not in it, and then call them when there's a problem. With that relationship building, they can work on issues and prevent issues, and also provide that counseling that some of the kids need. I'm passionate about the SRO program because initially when this program started in the early 90s, I even questioned it. That, is that really something that we have to do, of having police in the schools? But things have changed in the school system, and with safety, it became a concern. But then we also saw the plus that it provided, that building those relationships early on so they can see the police not just as the one that comes and arrests people and issues citations, but there's another side of a police officer. They are actually counseling, coaching, and mentoring these kids in school, and that's something that can be very rewarding.
You hit the nail right on the head, Chief. I couldn't tell you how many videos I've watched where SROs were engaged in this very fruitful, educational, and very engaging conversations with our young schoolers, where it was fun. It looked to me like everybody was learning, but it was fun. There are so many facets to an SRO program, as the way I see it as a parent, than what is being portrayed out there. Now, I've also heard comments and objections about funding. Why should we fund an SRO program? That's money wasted. Well, don't get me started about the board and the county wasting money on programs that are not needed at all. Right? In my opinion.
Right.
My individual opinion doesn't count, but
sure
does. But what I'm saying is, we are selecting these programs based on what's politically convenient, based on what is fitting the national narrative, and then making choices for our communities whether they are right or not.
Now, I'm with you. And I hear,
you know what I mean?
And people say, "Oh, I don't want those who don't like SROs. Make the children uncomfortable." Well, going back to what you both are saying, it seems to me I'd rather have a child see an SRO at a school and have that be their first encounter with a police officer than being stopped, or having something else happen in the community that's maybe probably one of the worst days of their life. Let's say something terrible happens to the family, and a police officer has to come to help them. So now they're dealing with probably the worst thing they've ever had to deal with in their life, and having a police officer there. How about have a relationship with a police officer before that happens, and you can see that there may be, especially elementary school. Now, we weren't planning on putting them in every elementary school, but we were going to have them go visit elementary schools.
Right.
And I was with a principal one time at elementary school. We were walking around, and she looked at me and she goes, "You know why SROs are important? You know why police officers coming through our schools are important?" I said, "Why?" She goes, "Because look at that door right there." She goes, "You know where that door goes?" I go, "No." She goes, "That door goes to the roof." She goes, "But if we don't have a police officer who comes in here regularly and know that door goes to the roof, what if someone comes in here, an active shooter or something, and goes up to the roof? He doesn't know that person went up to the roof. Or what if he needs to go up the roof, or she needs to go up the roof to look out and see what's going on? They need to know the school." And just to have, our police officers are amazing, but it's a lot easier for them to come and do something when they're familiar with the situation than with not.
I was talking to, I'm sorry,
no,
take a turn, but I was talking to another parent in our school district, and I say to her, I said, I'd rather have my 11-year-old high-fiving a police officer than having that police officer put handcuffs on her hand when she's 18.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that's a much better outcome of
Absolutely.
having that education and engagement at early age than regret about not having it at later age.
Right. Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out that, with that trust that they build with students, we've had a number of cases in which a student has built up that trust with an SRO, and they've shared situations where there's abuse taking place, physical, sometimes sexual abuse, and they reported that to the SRO, who then gets that student in contact with our Child Advocacy Center, and then they can take the investigation from there. So there's a lot of things that that the SROs, and really the word resource is a great term. They are resources for students, just like counselors, that they can help kids through times that they're struggling and get them the help that they need, just like a counselor can. And they build that trust from being there and earning the trust from the students. And I just want to get back to the ones, the people who are concerned about the SRO in those schools. Then let's work to find out what that barrier is. Why are they concerned about the officer in that school, that they feel uncomfortable? Let's work to change that by removing them, putting them back out on the street behind the curtain, and then when a call comes in, then to go into the school. That's not improving the relationship. We're going in the opposite direction. And I just don't understand that.
Now, I've talked to so many teachers and administrators and students too, and I very seldom, almost never hear people say they don't want them. It's just shocking how many people think they are so important for the community. The one thing that comes up sometimes is, our police officers are disciplining the children. And that's not what my understanding is happening, and they shouldn't be. They should not be there as disciplinarians. And I know if we talk about the training, that is for the administration, that is for the teachers, and it's my understanding that the super great majority, maybe 90-95% of the time that a police officer is called to address a situation, and you can confirm this or not, Chief, it's because the administration asked them to. It wasn't like they were looking around the school to try to find somebody. They were asked by the administration to come. Is that
right?
Accurate?
When I was there, we took a look at the SRO calls for service, and I think it was over 80% of the officer-initiated activity was as a result of being called by the administration to address some situation. So it wasn't the officer directly engaging or initiating that situation. So their role, first of all, let's get back to the training.
Yes.
The SRO, in Howard County, we're fortunate. We send all of our SROs to the national program, the National SRO Association, and they have a 1-week program. And part of that training does involve that delegate balance, that the SRO is not taking over discipline in that school. That's the responsibility of the administration, the principal and the administration. We are there to help facilitate and support what's taking place in the school. And, we want to be a part of that staff on the school administration, to help and guide counseling situations, bullying cases, things that come up like that, and be a part and help. But the training that they receive, they're taught about that balance that you have to maintain, and you develop that relationship with the school. But the 40-hour program is just the beginning. They also have de-escalation training they go through. They go through diversity training here in Howard County. We have a very diverse school population, so that's important. But they also learn that each school is a little different. So the issues in one school in this part of the county may be different from another part of the county, and you have to make those adjustments. And then, unique things. One of the things I really loved about our SRO program, they developed a couple of SROs developed a program where when days off occurred in a school, what happens sometimes when kids are off from school and the parents are at work, they get into things. So they would host trips. They would go down to the Holocaust Museum, take other trips to DC, make it a learning experience, but also a fun experience. So they're learning something while also being engaged with the officers. And I just thought that was incredible. They're taking time on what would be a normal day off, but they're actually engaged in education, also fun with the officer. So, that training continues too. It doesn't just stop at a 40-hour program. There's an advanced program that they can attend. It's 3 days, in addition to what we do with the Howard County Public School System. We get together each year with the administration. We talk about things that happened over the year, what can we improve on, and again, we worked collaboratively with the school to address the issues that we saw so we can function better as school resource officers in the school with the administration to do the best job we can for the kids. So the training is ongoing each year. So when kids are off in the summer, our SROs are not. They're actually going through many training programs, either the national school, de-escalation, other techniques and things that they're doing. They're getting to know their school. As Allan mentioned earlier, when we make assignments for the school or change some things around, those officers go to those schools. They learn the hallways. They learn the doorways. We found through inspections of schools with school security that we would do periodically that some schools were leaving doors open in the back. They would prop them open, and those are checks that were being made. All those things just to keep our kids safe in the school.
It certainly wasn't unusual at schools to have teachers actually. They would put a rock in the door so they could get closer from the parking lot to get inside. And I can understand why they're doing that, but it's not safe.
Exactly.
And so, that's definitely a concern. I mean, before we go to that makes me also think about just the training we have, because we're also here, and this kind of goes back to the traffic stops a little bit, concerns about how our police department, our police officers deal with people in the minority community, immigrant community, minority community. I mean, I know there's an awful lot of training and an awful lot of discussion with different groups. If you can maybe go through that a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't understand what officers go through and what they, how they're trained and how they relate with different communities.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, as I mentioned before, like schools are different because we have such a diverse population in our schools. That's something that's discussed in officers. So for their awareness and how to work through the different cultures in our county. And the same thing exists with every aspect of a police officer's job and how we work within our communities. So when I was there, we worked with the NAACP, the African American Roundtable, the Asian community, countless communities, LGBT. Sometimes we would have formal partnership agreements, and we would go through the issues and the concerns that they would have with the police department, and do training programs or having dialogue, panel discussions, whatever the case. Sometimes just social engagement. So they would, with church groups, we had, and the church slips my mind, I apologize, they'll be upset that I forget, but we used to have a kickball game over off of Cradle Rock, annual picnic. So we would engage with the congregation. So people would have that opportunity to talk to us. The officers would have an opportunity. And it wasn't, and what's so important, it's not just the community officers who were doing this. We would pull people from patrol, if they were available during that time, to engage with us and that community so they get to know one another. We've had programs that we would do at our training academy, bringing different groups in so they could see what training we go through, have an opportunity to go through simulators so they can understand what an officer goes through. And so then we can understand some of the concerns that the community has during a traffic stop, or why do we do certain things. Why do we ask people to step out of a car sometimes? All those things are critical. It's about understanding and communication. That is the underlying key.
Yep.
You know, this reminds me of a great experience that we've had about 3-4 years ago. So I don't know, Alan, you were invited to a couple of these events in Indian community, especially Gujarati Indian community. There is a dance festival in October that comes. We call it Garba, right? So the Meadowbrook Athletic Center every year until the pandemic used to host those Garbas, and we remember. I'm pulling out stereotypes here, but we Gujaratis, we love Taco Bell. So there was like a tradition that after every Garba event, which typically would end at 1:30 in the middle of the night, we would go to this Taco Bell off of Minstrel Way, I think, off of Snowden River Parkway. And then I think in 2017 or 18, there were maybe 50 cars in their drive-thru ordering Taco Bell. And then everybody was getting their order, because at that time the indoor seating would be closed. So we'll have to sit in the car and eat. So everybody would then pull in the parking lot and open their trunks and then sit there and eat. Now, one day, an employee at Taco Bell found that a little bit weird, so they called cops, right? So Howard County Police, 3, 4, 5 units show up, and they're asking us questions like, why you guys dressed this way, and what party are you coming from, and this, that, and the other. And we talked about Garba with them. It's like, yeah, we remember. And 10 minutes later, we were teaching them how to play Garba, right? So going back to what you were talking about, Chief, I think the problem in our society these days is how we also look at officers and say every time an officer's presence is there, it's a problem. It's not. The Taco Bell employee was right in calling the cops because there were 35 cars in their parking lot at almost 2 o'clock in the morning with open trunks. Right to suspect, right? But then when the officers came in and we talked, we realized that this was a very, normal situation. And we engaged and we exchanged laughs and, talked about cricket and God knows. So that element in our society these days is missing. And I think that might contribute to some of the morale issues that you were talking about before.
Absolutely. And one of the things we teach officers is that a call that came in that they made from the Taco Bell, many times police officers are dispatched to calls. We don't know the origins. We don't know anything about that caller. They're describing something to a 911 dispatcher who then conveys that information to an officer on the road. And they go, and then they do an assessment. And we always remind them that we don't know the background. So it's their job when they get there not automatically make assumptions. Obviously, officer safety is a concern in any type of incident they respond to. But then you make the inquiries. I mean, if they'd have come in, blazing, got their guns out or hands on a gun, whatever, or were very direct and I don't want to say, rude in coming in and making assumptions. We don't want them to do that. We want them to find out what's going on. They're fact finders. And it sounds like that's exactly what they did. You weren't offended by that presence and asking questions, because in the end, it was a happy ending, and they learned something as well.
And I would tell folks, if you can, do a ride-along. I don't know if you've ever done a ride-along.
I have never done it.
You should contact them, because I did those before I was county executive. I did some when I was county executive. It's kind of funny when you're county executive. Then I think the officer's like, the county executive's with me. But I'm telling you, to see our police officers, and I would try to go in the evenings to see it more, and a few of them were in Columbia and some outside Columbia, but to see these officers who are regularly on the beat, they're all staying in the same area, which is really important. And we would go to village centers or other shopping centers, different things, and they would know the people who are causing issues. They knew them personally. And they would talk to them and they didn't arrest them. They would say, come on now, Bill or Jane or whatever, that's not tonight. Let's not do this tonight. Let's head on back. And they have a really good conversation. It wasn't like the first thing I want to go there is put handcuffs on them and put them in a car and take them away. No, they were trying to de-escalate the situation. And then we would ride around somewhere else, and we'd come back in, and they're doing it again. And the same people were doing it again, and they'd be like, they're not arresting them. They're trying to work through the issues, because we don't want to arrest people. We don't want to put people in jail. We want to make people, abide and respect other people. And the one thing I've really learned is our police officers respect our community. And that's one thing I want people to know, that they respect our community and they care about our community. They're not there just to do a job. They're there because they care. And, I couldn't be more proud of our police officers in our department. And, I'm just sad that I think right now they don't feel like they have the respect of not the community, but the county executive and the county executive's office. I don't think they feel like they have that respect.
Sure. And I agree. I mean, a little bit presumptuous on my part, but I would bet that if we have a rally of some sort, that every police officer that we have, I mean, they're very committed to their work, but I don't think that there would not be a thought crossing their mind saying, do I want to call in sick today? I don't want to engage. I don't feel comfortable with this engagement anymore.
I think
part of
that
the problem.
I do, like I said, with morale, that is a big issue. Morale is a big issue. Again, haven't seen it this bad since the time I started, and it has to be addressed. We have to get to the root cause to find out what exactly it is. Probably a multitude of things. It's not one thing in particular, but what they need more than anything right now is support. They need to know that they have the support of leadership in the department, and more importantly, leadership in the administration in carrying out those duties, because they know that the public in general and across the country, I think, by and large, they really do support the police. There certainly is segments in the community that right now question. For example, Baltimore City has. They have a big hurdle to overcome, and they're working through that right now, trying to make it a much better police department than where they were 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But that is something that I don't want to see what I consider to be the finest agency in this state taking the turn that it is right now. It has to change. It has to turn around.
Well, taking this back to the leadership, I think that our current administration definitely needs a little bit more strength in their actions in supporting the SRO programs, because as a father, as a resident in this county, I am worried.
Yeah, and I'm telling you,
I am very worried.
In some way, we can't wait till the next election.
No,
we need it fixed now.
Now.
I mean, I would really call on the county executive to say, hey, I'm putting it back in middle schools. I mean, I'm contacting the school system. We're putting it back in middle schools now. Because, I mean, what, God help us, what if something terrible happens in another 2 months? And then we're going to do it? I mean, too often we do things because we react.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe Gary and both of you talked about it. I mean, we need to be proactive, preventative.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that that's something that, even though there's a stark contrast between me and the current county executive on this issue, let's not worry about that. Let's just fix it. And let's put them back in as soon as we can, because our kids are too important. They're too important. And I have a daughter, I didn't say it earlier, who's a teacher. It's also for teacher safety. It's for administration safety. I mean, teachers should be there to teach our kids. They shouldn't have to worry that they have to look behind their backs because someone could be coming through the school. They need to know that they have a safe and secure place for them to learn and to teach.
Absolutely.
Going to leadership, though, I wanted to bring up this other point that really concerned me early on in this administration. And when I first got elected, I was concerned about the aviation program. We have a helicopter program. I mean, can you explain what the aviation program was when you were in office?
Well, we had a partnership program with the Anne Arundel County Police Department where we shared resources with our aviation services to provide a wider coverage 7 days a week. And aviation is just another set of eyes in the sky that can provide a different perspective for officers who are out on crime scenes. Could be traffic-related issues, and also missing persons. I recall a case, and I believe it was over the Target, where an elderly gentleman was with a family member. It might have been during the holiday season. It was winter. It was cold, and became separated. And the helicopter went up with their thermal imaging, and they actually found the individual in a ditch that he had gone unconscious. Had fallen and hit himself, and they were able to bring him to a hospital and get him the treatment that he needed. And countless times, our aviation program would be engaged in, for example, we had a shooting right during the day on Route 1 of an officer going to a suspicious call. The suspect brandished a gun, fired shots at an officer, hit one of our officers right across Route 1. He went into the wooded area. We had a search that went on into the overnight, into the early morning, and services such as the helicopter there doing thermal imaging, trying to find the suspect in the community who was obviously dangerous, had already fired shots and struck one of our officers, and also hit an ambulance. So the service that a helicopter can provide is just a different perspective. And, in Howard County, we want the best schools. We want the best amenities. We want the best recreation and parks. And we want the best police department with the resources top of the line. And they have improved a lot from the time that I started. And the loss of that was, I think, devastating to the agency. We were looking at a drone program at that time when I left to see if drones could be a component within the department, either support or replace aviation. It really depended on the study that we were going to launch in that technology to see, what were the limitations, and then do a cost-effective analysis on whether or not the drone program could do the same functions as aviation. Instead of eliminating aviation and then trying to quickly scramble together a drone program to roll out to replace it, if that was going to be the case, then maybe a much smoother, planned transition would have been a much better approach.
That's where I go to leadership. And I'll be honest, when I was running in 2014, I wasn't so sure we needed an aviation program. And I was thinking that maybe we don't. And this just shows you old dolls can learn new tricks. I sat down probably within the first month or two I was in office, and Chief Gardner came with Major Lockman, who was, I guess, in charge of the aviation program. And they convinced me that it's something we should keep. And I think that's the type of leaders you want, someone who may be coming in with one thought, but after they hear, because when you're not in office, you really don't know. You just hear stories. But once you're sitting there and then people can show you the benefits of it, it's like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. And you can't be so stubborn to say, no, I said that before, therefore I've got it. No, you've got to be willing to change. And I changed, and I'm glad I did, because I think and I can tell the story that out not too far from where I live one night, there was a helicopter flying over, and people in my neighborhood, just like everyone else, calls, okay, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. And so I contacted them, and apparently a gentleman had gotten out of a van that was coming from Western Maryland, I guess going to Springfield Hospital, and he got out. And the helicopter was up trying to find him. It was the middle of the night. And I know they had the base set up at a local church. I went over to the church, and I was in the trailer, and I'm watching them look, and we could see. And they found the person very quickly. He was sitting next to someone's tennis court or something, I think, and they found him, and they got him right away. I mean, they did it like very, very quickly. And I bring this all up because the whole leadership issue, because when County Executive Ball came in, he decided to get rid of it. I can't remember, but I'm sure he probably criticized me when I said I wanted to get rid of it in 2014 while I was running. But anyway, so he got rid of it, and he did, just like you were saying, Chief Gardner, he did it without having the drone program in place. And if anyone remembers, in July of 2019, we had this terrible incident where a gentleman went missing, and he was gone for, I think, 5 days. And people had been searching for him. They've been searching through different parks. They didn't know where for sure he was. I think they thought he might have gone running somewhere, so they went looking at different parks. I read in the article in the paper that the police department went to parks. They went to hospitals to check on things. Did anyone not think to put the helicopter up? Had we had a helicopter, the helicopter could have gone up right away. If you had a drone program, the drone program could have gone up right away. But we didn't have either. And that shows poor leadership. You don't get rid of one when you don't have the other one in place. And thankfully, the family, according to the article in the paper, put out a request for anyone who had a drone, could you help us? And a person from a neighboring county said sure, and he saw that, and he came over. And reading the article, I had battery for like 90 minutes. I was really concerned I wouldn't have enough time. He put the drone up. He found the individual in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, and he was conscious, but he was laying down, and they found him. He had life-threatening injuries. He fortunately has survived, and everything, hopefully he's doing fine. But think about how close that was. And had we had a helicopter, we would have found him the first day.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
To me, it's like, wow. I mean, that shows a lack of support, a lack of understanding, and I would have hoped the police chief at the time would have said, hey, county executive, don't do this. We don't have this other program ready. I don't know anything about the internal discussions about that, but to me, we're just so thankful that this gentleman didn't die. He so easily could have died. So that, I think, is an example.
If you're going to be a top-line agency, I mean, having all those resources at your disposal. Many years ago when I started in the county, we used to rely on the Maryland State Police for their helicopter, their aviation services. But as they explained to us, priority for the Maryland State Police is medevac. Medevac emergency services is their priority, and they cannot stay up in the air as long. They're limited with their resources. So you cannot rely on them when you have certain types of criminal activity taking place and you're using the helicopter for a search for a missing person or a suspect that may be fled into the woods, something like that.
Right.
So having that capability was a valuable resource. Again, if you believe that drones would be a solution to reduce costs, because it is an expensive program, there's no question about that, but then make a transition. Then do your study, find out what the limitations are, and then make your decision based on what you see, and then wait till you have something in place before you make that decision to replace it.
Exactly. So those are some of the concerns I have. The last thing I thought I'd bring up is the body-worn camera program. We've been a lot of talk about having cameras for our officers. I know the program is hopefully going to effect soon. But I think some people may not realize, Chief, that it was under your administration when we first started looking into that and having the pilot programs, correct?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about what you were doing with it before you left?
We took a close look at the body-worn camera program. Major Jones took the lead on that and did some research. We had, at the ICP conference, gone to several seminars on the body camera program. And there are pros and cons to it. So it's not a panacea. And that was about transparency. So we decided to take a look, do a study. We did. And we actually learned some things that were positive in the sense that, sometimes for officer training, that when when supervisors would view a video and we would see how an officer maybe conducted a traffic stop, that's not what we wanted, and you have that chance to remediate the situation, preventing another problem maybe down the road. So it had a lot of value. The concern that I have is that sometimes with the release of a video clip with something that people will automatically rush to judgment in what the officer did, that it was either right or wrong. And in my opinion, not the case. You really have to look at the totality of circumstances, but it does provide some benefit. And we were looking at that and actually had made a recommendation at the end to do body cameras in the county with the caveat that first we believe that patrol staffing was the priority first. And when patrol staffing was addressed, then we would look to move to a body worn camera program.
I just think it's important people realize that was actually going on during our administration, that we were hearing the concerns. We wanted to make sure that we would do the due diligence. And I think it's going forward now, which I think is good. And of course, have to make sure that the community is involved and the police officers are involved, which I think they are. But the cost is a lot. State's attorney's office have to go through things to make sure things that aren't discoverable or things like because someone's in the background that's a private citizen that's not right. So I can understand a lot of things going on, but I can see it's moving forward. But I think it's important that people realize that it's something that was dealt with back in our administration, and I appreciate your leadership on that, Chief, as well. But any last thoughts you might have on discussion on crime or public safety? Or
No. I think like the chief said in the beginning, Howard County. When we talk about Howard County as a place that you live and you conduct your business, you want the best schools, you want the best resources, you want the best amenities. Right now, part of it we have covered. 62% of my property tax bill, goes to the schools. And as a parent, and again, very emotional about it, starting from redistricting to SROs to cutting some of these vital programs for public safety without any concern on how we're going to transition into this new realities, just hatching it for the fact of, doing it, isn't helping our community. I don't think in last 3 years I've felt safer Before this, I used to live in PG County. And again, not talking down any counties here, but the talk in the town when I lived in Laurel and on PG County side was, well, this is PG County. What do you expect, right? But when you move to Howard County, you do expect. That's when I was considering a lot in Howard County. I had schools in my mind. I had safe environment in my mind. I had the amenities of, I'll have a bike lane and this, that, and the other. By the way, if you want to talk about public safety, I run on Highland Road.
Okay.
There is no bike lane or running lane on Highland Road. You can't ask me how many people don't give you the way when you're running. All of those things are important to me as a resident in this county, and
Well, thank you. Thank you for being part of it today. And Chief, thank you for your leadership. I certainly appreciated serving with you and for your long leadership in the police department. I mean, I just, I don't know if you have any last thoughts. I was going to say something.
No, I think that, as I said earlier, I think the men and women of the Howard County Police Department are some of the finest in the country.
Agreed.
We hire problem solvers who are community oriented, and to see the morale the way it is, we have to really get to the bottom of that, and we have to show those officers that they're supported. That's really the key.
Absolutely.
And so I'm hoping that can turn around very soon.
And that's really important to me as well. And that's why every time I see an officer, I thank them for what they're doing. I thank them for the way they care about our community. I mean, you had a tremendous leadership staff, Chief. I mean, I had great respect for everybody. I still have great respect for people there. And I just think it's important that they know that they have the support from the county executive, they have the support from the county council and from the leadership, and of course in the police department itself. But we deserve nothing less, and they deserve nothing less.
Absolutely.
And Howard County is. I've lived here all my life. It's the greatest place to live in America, but we can cause harm if we don't continue to support those who are protecting us. And,
Absolutely.
As I feel about the firefighters, people who are willing to put their life on the line for me at a moment's notice, I'm going to respect them and thank them, and I'm going to default to that they're doing a good job.
Yes.
I'm not going to default to they're doing a bad job.
Absolutely.
So thank
Very
you all
true.
very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you so
you.
much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.